of what a culture of belonging actually looks like. This is a Lead Dev webinar created in partnership with Twitter. Our webinar today will last roughly 45 minutes, after which both myself and the panelists will head over to the Lead Dev Slack to answer some of your questions in diversity inclusion channel. So let's get started with some introductions. My name is Jason Wong. I'm a leadership coach and fractional VP of engineering with only over 20 years of experience in the tech industry. And today I have the honor of being your panel moderator. For these next 45 minutes, I'm delighted to be joined by our esteemed panelists. First up, we have Erica Stanley. Erica is an engineering leader, entrepreneur, and tech diversity and inclusion advocate. She's an acting general manager at Mozilla, working with Mozilla Hubs, a social mixed reality platform. In her 20-year career, she's worked in Fortune 500 companies, early stage startups, and academia. Erica is active in the Atlanta technology community. She helps develop and teach youth code programs, speaks at local conferences, user groups, and mentors entrepreneurs in various incubators and accelerators. She also founded the Atlanta Network of Women Who Code, where she organizes conferences, hackathons, developer workshops, monthly tech talks, and networking events for women technologists. Next up, we have Benji Shine. Benji Shine is a software developer turned learning specialist. In his 20 years in software development, he often built educational technology, but rarely was a teacher himself. Upon developing wrist injuries from too much programming, he shifted his target from software development to human development. His goal is to build a kinder, gentler, more just generation of software engineers. He currently runs engineering onboarding at Slack, where he's onboarded hundreds of engineers. Benji's secret power is stealth diversity. He looks like a cis-het non-disabled man, but is actually a disabled queer trans man. Next, we have Yenny Chung. Originally from Hong Kong, Yenny is an engineering manager at Rasa, where she is learning how to make open source conversation AI accessible to all. She cares about building an inclusive environment for teams and communities with a people-first approach. She enjoys the thrill of public speaking and meeting like-minded people along the way. You can find her on Twitter and at conferences on leadership and Python. And finally, Michael Montano. Michael is the VP of engineering at Twitter, where he leads their global engineering team. Before joining Twitter, he co-founded Backtype to focus on organizing online conversations and helping people follow what was being talked about. The company created and open sourced the Apache Storm project, a distributed real-time computation system. Backtype was acquired by Twitter in 2011. Since joining Twitter, Michael has led teams across the platform, advertiser products, and consumer product. Michael grew up in Canada and studied electrical engineering and computer engineering from the University of Toronto. So hello to all our panelists. And again, a welcome to all joining us around the world. Before we get going, anyone who's dipped their toes in diversity, equity, and inclusion space knows that the language and terminology changes rapidly. So I'd love to just start out by establishing the differences between inclusion and belonging. I think most of us are familiar with the Verne Meyer saying that diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. Belonging is dancing like there's no one watching. And another way to put that is sort of diversity is the fact, inclusion is the choice, but belonging is that feeling. Also, I just wanted to remind everyone that as with all DEI-related discussions, the goal here is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Being a DEI practitioner means constantly challenging ourselves by being curious, doing our own work, and keeping our focus on the larger goal. Right? To paraphrase Austin Channing Brown, this work is about becoming a better human to other humans. So on that note, let's go ahead and dive in. Erica, let's start with you. So let's imagine that it's someone's first day at a new job. How do they assess the state of the org when it comes to belonging? What are the smells how would you know that the company's commitment to belonging extends past their public statements about it?
Yes, so there are a few things. First of all, I think you should start even before you're officially starting as an employee at that company, right? You would want to, as you're interviewing, you would want to ask a few questions and make a few observations. One of those is, what is the highest level, especially in technical leadership, for any marginalized people? What is the highest level that they hold within the company? If you notice a trend, for instance, of perhaps there are marginalized people or people from marginalized groups in engineering, but they are at lower levels or they're at entry levels, and you don't see a lot of that in leadership, that's a smell. Something else, just asking them about, some of their initiatives and some of the goals of those initiatives. How are they involved in the community? What kinds of organizations and communities do they get involved in? How long have they been involved with those communities? Do they have people on staff that are parts of those communities and are listening to those communities as they build their diversity, inclusion, belonging programs at the company?
Great. Yenny, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually recently started at Rasa, so that's something that I keep in mind, right? I want to think about this topic as I start. So I think that for engineering, when something goes wrong, we look at the incident response runbook on what to do. So I think that the harassment policy, it's kind of like the incident response runbook, but for a company's culture. And one important aspect I look at is how the company would react when things actually don't go according to plan. I think that the company needs to be transparent about the whole reporting process, and they need to be firm on the stance. A bad process could look like this, like it puts the burden on the reporter. For example, you would ask them, like, what would it take for you to move on from this incident? Or like, what do you want to do about this? I think that the company needs to have a clear stance in these things. For example, if X happens, then the company would take action in these multiple ways. So that's something I look at.
Great, thank you. I find this incredibly interesting. I feel like sometimes something that like I've run into in my past career is, I go to a company and the company like makes a public statement, but when you walk into the halls of the company, like there's no actual manifestation of that belonging. There's no conversation about it. There's no talking about it. So I think this is really great. Like looking at sort of what the highest level of underrepresented groups have achieved at the company, looking at things like the structure of harassment policies and those things. So awesome. Something I picked up from Meko Karake is that culture is nothing more than like a set of behaviors that are rewarded and punished. And that leads to actually defining behaviors of inclusion and designing equity into your career ladder. Yenny, you've spoken about this in the past. Like, what are some of your thoughts on how to integrate inclusion and equity into a career ladder?
Recently working on the engineering levels as well. So I also had some thoughts on that. I think that promoting people who don't have the skill to make employees feel welcome, that would prevent the company's culture from being inclusive. So I think including it into the levels is important, and it serves two purposes. One is we want to recognize people who spend the time and effort to improve the company's culture and drive it forward. But at the same time, we also want to establish a baseline, no? To set an expectation that everybody needs to contribute positively to this inclusive environment that we're striving very hard to push forward. And I have several examples that can manifest these kind of behaviors. For example, it could be actively making space for teammates from all backgrounds to participate and to succeed, making sure that their views are being heard. Another example could be a teammate attending an ally skill training and then using their own power and privilege to raise difficult issues on other teammates' behalf. Or another thing I can think of is to actively fight against unconscious biases. For example, during the interview process, when they're giving the interview feedback, they would start with first listing the facts, right? What are the questions and answers being tackled during the interview? Analyze the facts before kind of just jumping into a conclusion right away after the interview. Or better yet, coming up with a structured interview process to ensure that we, if not eliminate, we try to minimize the amount of unconscious bias we can put into the interview process.
I feel like, something that I think this touches on is that like it takes time and effort, right? And I think a lot of the time our model of engineers and our model to date has just been like, you have to be good enough to do the job, right? It's like doing the job and getting the technical pieces done is the important piece. I think what we're looking at here is like expanding this definition of what it means to be a high performing engineer, which is not just like you have the technical skills to do the job, but also like you can treat people with respect, you can facilitate and moderate conversations, you can de-escalate and make space for people. Which, you know, I think when we talk about this space, oftentimes there is this weird forced framing of you can either be good at your job or be good at diversity and equity and inclusion. And actually what we're talking about is you have to be good at both in order to be successful. Great. Michael, so there are normal times and then there are these pandemic times. Like something that everyone is facing right now is this figuring out like how to get along in this remote working world. So what are some of the things that Twitter has done to sort of adapt their belonging initiatives to this remote atmosphere and environment?
Thanks. That's a great question. And I'm glad that you call out, especially that it's not normal times right now, it's pandemic. So there's working remote as a company, they're moving in that direction as a company, and then there's working remotely during a pandemic, and it's very different. And it's worth kind of speaking a bit about that. I would actually love to kind of separate those two things a little bit and share some of what we're doing in pandemic times to drive inclusion and diversity and belonging, I apologize, and also how we're adapting to remote work with inclusion and belonging really at the core of that. So when it comes to the pandemic times, I think our message, well, I know that our message has always been very clear from day one to our team: take care of yourselves, take care of your people, take care of each other. Our people's health is our top priority. So we have asked our teams and emphasized that they should do whatever they need to stay healthy. We have tried as a company to support our employees, encourage them to take care of themselves is key. And that's the only way, in fact, that we can continue to serve our customers who are coming to the platform in such a critical time as well. So I'd say some of the examples of things that we've concretely done, little things to share, are things like days of rest. Really, and it seems simple, but we have been doing since the beginning of the pandemic a day off every month for the whole company. And one of the things that we've heard that is powerful about that is it's actually the whole company being off at the same time. There's a lot of pressure that people feel right now to perform, and everybody has very different circumstances right now. So actually giving this time off, we've recently heard from some of our teams saying that in many ways, these coordinated days of rest across the company have been better for them than entire vacations, which we also encourage people to do right now. And we try to model as a set of leaders, which is nobody's traveling to take vacation right now, but take vacation. We need it. I need it. I've taken a couple of vacations in the last 6 months, and so have my team. And we've encouraged everyone to do the same. I'd say beyond that, we've done things to really recognize that we don't know everything our colleagues are dealing with. Some are dealing with caregiving, some have elderly sick parents, some are certainly dealing and wrestling with all of the injustice that we're seeing in the world. And I think what we've done is really tried to give everyone permission to say, I can't show up today, I need a day off. Or I'm carrying more right now and I just can't deliver what I normally would. So that's been an important part of our culture and the tone and message that we've set as an example. And we model, I think we try to model as an executive team as well with each other. The other things we've done is we've introduced a series of kind of very intentional programs. One that we call internally Flock Talk, which is one that we've activated to bring employees together during difficult times, to share what's going on with them, to find community, to be heard by leaders within the company. We found this particularly important during things like the Black Lives Matter movement and SARS in Nigeria, which so many of our Nigerian employees are really feeling a lot, and we're having conversations about. And these are also conversations that are heavily discussed on the platform. And then finally, we have really launched a series of talks to foster open conversation about racial equity, anti-racism, and social justice here at Twitter, and hosted external speakers to come and spend time with our team. So there's a lot that we've done, a lot more that we're continuing to do when it comes to pandemic times, because we know this is going to continue. Quickly on the remote work, I just want to acknowledge that we as a company have been on a path towards becoming decentralized well before the pandemic. It's something that we recognized is critical to continue on our journey of serving people who use Twitter, increasing innovation, and creating an environment where teams can do their most creative work. the reason why this is so important to our strategy and core to us is that the only way we can serve a global audience and a global set of customers is actually by having a diverse and representative team, and then creating the culture and environment to unlock their flexibility. And the flexibility is, I think, the big part of remote work that has been so important for us to observe, iterate on, learn, and constantly kind of improve, because it's actually allowed for a whole bunch of things to be unlocked. It's unlocked our recruiting team to extend, my leadership team and other leaders in the company, to really accelerate our efforts around recruiting outside of tech hubs, recruiting in more diverse communities. It has also allowed us to accelerate inclusion in a more distributed manner by just developing better norms around asynchronous work, meeting hygiene, flexible schedules that have actually been able to accommodate people doing their best work and cope with everything that's going on, as well as kind of all the trainings that we've done around inclusion and diversity in the company. Onboarding, changed how we've assigned projects, or built on process for how we assign projects within teams and give out stretch opportunities. So there's a lot more that we can do, but definitely agree that it's not normal times, and that this is something Twitter's been really focused on. And coming back to one of the points that you were making before around kind of the importance of recognizing in career ladders the skills that really make engineers successful in their career. I think it's been an important time for us to elevate those in our own career ladder, reward and recognize those as well, and make sure that as we're hiring team members who we never meet in person right now. And I think it's really important that we're looking for those skills that lead to inclusion and collaboration in the team.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. I really resonate with sort of those coordinated days off. I see something I've seen across a lot of my clients is this just burnout, right? Like vacation and time away from work means something completely different now. I'm wondering, is that something like a couple of things? One is, time is like the thing we never get back, and the business pressures of meeting deadlines. Like, how do we balance that with this flexibility and this time off? Like, how do you get buy-in for these ideas? Michael, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, one thing that really resonates with me is something that Jack sent in a note to the entire company, I believe on the 1st or 2nd of March, as we were a company that kind of moved to work from home and thinking about our employees' safety kind of globally and their health pretty quickly. And he sent a note to the leaders in the company, really kind of emphasizing that, again, first, we have our health and we have to take care of that. So focus on sleep, your family, and all those sorts of things. But then as leaders in the company, the things that we can control are what we prioritize and how we resource what we work on. And it's been very important for us to not only tell our teams and acknowledge that we recognize that capacity, bandwidth, performance, everything can be impacted in these times because people are dealing with different things, but we have direct control over what we prioritize. So it's important for us to recognize that, send a consistent and clear message to our team. This is what's important to serve our customers right now, and this is what's not, and this is where we're going to put our energy, and this is what we understand we're just not going to be able to deliver on. So I think the reminder, I think, to everyone who's a manager really is think about what you control, and that's your priorities and your resources and how you take care of and are there for your team.
So offer
Awesome.
a slightly different lens on that. The work that we do as knowledge workers, as engineers and managers, is not just banging out as many widgets as we can make using a simple machine. The work that we do is creative and intellectual and even emotional. And I believe that we can do much, much better at that work when we do take the time out to recharge a little bit. I just spent 4 days bicycling the California coast, and I am so much more ready to talk to new people about engineering than I was after 6 weeks of doing that without a break. We can do better at our job by meeting our employees' emotional and social and relaxation needs.
That's a great point, Benji. So, well, actually, this is a great segue. Like, you run engineering onboarding at Slack, right? Like, what are the things that you think about when designing that engineering onboarding as it relates to inclusion and belonging?
Yeah, At Slack, we have the benefit of people who are really, really willing to tell us how things are working in endless surveys. We give them something like 7 surveys in their first week. And then we've still been doing a lot of onboarding during this pandemic, which means that we've gotten a lot of feedback. We've been able to tune quite a lot. The single thing that seems to matter most about making our onboarding process inclusive is we start the first 2 talks with a slide that says, "You belong here." And then we tell them why. You belong here because we picked you and you picked us, and we all had a lot of choices there. And then we commit to, we are going to help you succeed. We're going to do everything we can to help you succeed because you're here. You belong here because you're here, and we explicitly are growing our community to include you. As Michael said, we say from day one, above all else, take care of yourself and your family. I think at this point that is table stakes, that any company that's not saying that is not being responsible to their employees. You need to be telling them to put that first, because really they're going to, and so let's give them permission. Another thing that's really important in creating onboarding that is inclusive is thinking about representation. At Slack, we have a really wonderful, diverse demographics of engineers. And so when I reach out to various subject matter experts to run and support engineering onboarding activities, I want to make sure that those people look like the, the overall community of Slack. So when we do our most technical introductory talks, Intro to Slack Architecture, you are not going to be looking at 2 cishet white men. I'm going to make sure that there are people giving that talk who represent our most senior engineers and who come from diverse backgrounds, and who speak with different accents and who look differently than each other. And I hear from participants that's really important to them, that they see someone who looks like them giving that talk. Especially seeing our women who are staff software engineers is really important. Another thing we can do is to normalize different skill levels. Most people come into engineering onboarding with a sense of imposter syndrome, or a sense that they are not as good as everyone else. And we break things up into letting people work at their own pace in an asynchronous way, so that you don't feel at any point like, I'm not doing this as fast as this other guy. You tell everything is at your own pace. We don't know what the right pace is. Only you know what the right pace is for you. Bunch of things we do there.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. I think it's just so powerful having sort of senior engineers who are not, cishet white men giving those tech talks, and being out there. I think there's a lot of companies who don't have any underrepresented groups in their senior levels. And like, how would you think, what advice would you give them in terms of thinking about their onboarding and how to get them started?
I think that honestly, a lot of the onboarding stuff can be done by people who are not the most expert. And you don't need to be a staff software engineer to help someone configure their editor. And so we can start to lift up people at all levels of their careers by giving them these opportunities to be speakers and educators about stuff that they're good at in kind of low stakes performance. If you've got a bunch of 6 new hires, they are eager to hear everything. They are a wonderful audience to practice being a speaker with. So we can be lifting people up for that. Give them a chance to excel, and then even give someone a chance, like Michael said, to stretch a little bit and say, okay, you're an associate software engineer. We're going to help you learn to give this talk, and we're going to help you get better at understanding this technology in order to explain it better.
And I'd like to chime in a little bit there, because I think it connects a little bit with the question at the beginning of the panel with what are some things you can use to determine if this is a company that actually is believes in diversity and inclusion and not just speaking about it, is to see people from different backgrounds in onboarding, in your hiring panel, in the whole process, making sure that women are represented, making sure that people of color are represented. That's extremely important. And I would like to echo what Benji said about, you don't have to be a senior level engineer to talk about getting your dev environment set up. Every engineer had to do that, right? And honestly, some of your newer members to the team or some of your more junior members to the team are closer to that process anyway. And so they will understand and anticipate the questions. But another thing is when you realize as a company that you don't have people from various backgrounds in your senior leadership, one thing you can do is talk about that. One thing you can do is talk about the ways that you are working to change that. Talk about the challenges, make it really transparent to people. I think a lot of times companies in that position are a little bit, shamed by not having that already. And so they just kind of avoid it. And instead of doing that, just really lean into it and talk about it, get ideas from people, even new people who are joining. And I think that will let people know that you're serious about changing that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So that brings up another question I have, and this is an interesting one. I feel like I'm sort of being a little, I don't know, what's the word? Close to the bone here for myself, but like something that I would admit here is that like oftentimes when I move or do something like towards equity, it has like hardly ever felt good to me. like, talking about this thing that's embarrassing to me or like making space for that conversation, feels really awkward, right? And then I think oftentimes we have this sort of storybook ending type of arc in our minds where like being on the right side of history often comes with this expectation that we have these warm fuzzy feelings about ourselves. But like every time I've done something, I've always felt that like I felt uncertainty. I felt like I'm putting my job at risk. I've felt like what I'm doing is inadequate. I've felt conflicted. And I'm guess what I'm asking here is like, am I the only one here? Yeah, Erica, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I'd like to, first of all, bring up something that Kim Creighton says a lot. I know other people have said it too, but you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like this is not the conversations that we're having to reach equity are not going to be comfortable. These are generations and generations of societal influences that are affecting what we can do here. So these aren't simple linear problems that you can just solve with tech, right? So this is not supposed to be, I don't think, a comfortable process. Honestly, I think, Jason, if you're uncomfortable, you're probably doing it right. And so that's one thing. But I think we can also kind of optimize for the end result, right? Optimize for, that young engineer that might not have found their place in this company, that might not have found their place in tech that's now thriving. Like those are the things that when I'm, cautious that this could, put my job at risk, or it's another uphill battle because now I'm trying to bring a lot of people to the same way of thinking. Whenever I see one of those engineers succeeding and thriving, whether it's at my company or somewhere else after we've mentored them and they've gone on to do something amazing somewhere else, those are the things that let me know I'm doing the right kinds of things. And so if you optimize not for comfort, not for career progression or and I know it sounds a little warm and fuzzy, right? Because we all, even though we want to work towards diversity and inclusion, we're all concerned about our careers for sure. But I, as a mentor, as a coach, am also concerned about the careers of the people that I influence. And so bringing that into kind of thinking about it helps me really see the value and see the benefit of it.
So that's such a great way of framing it.
Yes,
Optimizing for the end result.
I suggest in you being willing to be uncomfortable, to have the conversations, to think about, to try to nurture your empathy for the people who are already uncomfortable. So for instance, there's age-related vision decay, and now it's harder for me to see little tiny text on a screen. And so when I have to say to someone, I can't read that text, can you please make it larger? I feel uncomfortable and I feel ashamed. And so if you can think about what is the feeling of other people, what are the negative feelings that other people might have to feel or might be feeling if I don't put myself out there to bring up this topic, then I think that maybe can help with courage to have the conversation.
Yeah, and that's something that actually that struck me about like your bio, right? Something that we touched upon sort of in the conversation we had to prep for this panel is this idea of like acquired disability, which is something that's sort of new to me. Could you sort of give folks in the audience a primer of what acquired disability is?
Yeah, this was new to me too. I used to be able-bodied, and now I'm a little bit less able-bodied. For most of my life, I could type as much as I wanted to. And then about 5 years ago, I did way too much programming under way too much stress, and I lost the ability to use my hands as much. For a while, that was, I needed help to cut pancakes even, or to open doors. And now it's different every day. But really, acquired disability is something that happens way more often than we may think of. And it also can be temporary, and it can be invisible and intermittent. So if you think about someone with multiple sclerosis, you may not be able to see that they have multiple sclerosis, and maybe 5 years ago they didn't. But on a given day, they might have trouble walking upstairs, and 2 days ago they were fine walking upstairs. Or the age-related vision decay is another example of that. If you want to make your senior software engineers and your staff software engineers feel welcome, then make it a regular thing that if you share your screen with someone, you make your text bigger. I don't know if young people know this, but it's really common for everyone over 40 to start having difficulty reading text that's small. So a wonderful way to do inclusion. Yeah, right? Or even, Jason, I know you shared that you recently had shoulder surgery. And so that also changes how much you can use a computer. What I find can be useful to work with this, especially around invisible disabilities, is to explicitly make room for people to tell their coworkers what they need to be successful. My team does that via personal operating manuals, which is not a manager readme. It's a coworker statement of this is what I need. One of the things that's important to me that my coworkers know about me is I care deeply about spelling, so much, and punctuation, but it is really hard for me to get spelling and punctuation right all the time because I use dictation, or honestly, every keystroke hurts sometimes. So I need my coworkers to know my poor spelling and poor punctuation is a result of my disability, and it's not because of me being careless or bad at spelling. So those personal operating manuals are really useful there. And they also can encompass things like, I have a child I take care of, and sometimes that child has difficulty sleeping, and some days I'm just going to be a lot sleepier than other days. It doesn't mean that I'm a low energy person. It means that I'm in a particular condition at this moment. That sort of thing. Does that help, Jason?
Yeah, that's great. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, as we all get older, we're going to find out a whole bunch of things about our eyesight, our mobility, our ability to function in this industry. So it's super great. Zooming out a little bit, Michael, I think something that we're beginning to see is that some companies are like purposefully turning a blind eye to DEI, right? They see it as a distraction to their primary mission, that it's a path filled with drama and radical ideas. Something that I've come to appreciate about inclusive environments is that, in my experience, inclusive environments and cultures have actually have like an upper hand when it comes to things like de-escalating confrontations and repairing misunderstandings. Like these minor disagreements don't blow up into like huge arguments, right? Like the level of communication generally gets better. Oftentimes there's just a lot less ambiguity around social norms, which allow folks to like focus their brain power on business outcomes. I'm wondering what are some of the benefits that you see at Twitter in your day-to-day as a result of inclusion and belonging? You're muted.
Sorry, thanks, Jason. I was going to say, first off, I believe it's simply bad business to turn a blind eye to issues that affect your employees, your customers, users, and people around the world. I can speak for Twitter. We serve people around the world. We hope that our platform can give voice to the voiceless and be a place where healthy global conversation can happen, can bring together diverse points of view, and can, in the best cases, really enable the most important shared global problems to be tackled. So we could not even begin to attempt to serve our customers globally without building a globally diverse team and without having empathy and understanding for the needs of a global audience. So to me, the set of issues in society that our customers care about on our platform, and that platform be a host for healthy conversation, is the same set of issues that our employees care about. There is no way we could serve our customers and build and retain the right team create a culture that enables us to durably deliver for those customers if we didn't create space to bring to light and discuss the issues that we all care about. So that's just kind of like first off, I think it's just simply bad business and bad culture. To the latter part of your question around kind of some of the really specific advantage that diverse teams, that more inclusive teams have, absolutely. We see that the teams that deliver the best solutions for our customers are our most diverse teams. They have those advantages that you described, where different backgrounds, experiences, perspectives have helped the team problem solve, work together effectively, especially in the area which is our most important focus around the health of the public conversation. We have teams working across disciplines, across engineering, product design, research, policy, enforcement, that are diverse ethnically, from diverse genders, from diverse experiences, diverse parts of the globe, that really, I think, make this one of our most high-performing teams, and it's no coincidence.
Wow, that's awesome. Yenny, I think you had some thoughts on this too.
Yeah. So I'm a line manager. I think a lot about how to build a good team culture so that we can deliver, and it's just the right thing to do. I think that building an inclusive culture, it is a good and effective way to help a company reach the mission. And because we want to build great teams, we want the teams to do their best. And I think the first step to build such a great team is through building a safe environment where people can trust one another. I think that's where teamwork comes into being, right? When employees don't feel safe, and simple disagreements can easily blow up and escalate and become personal when that trust element is not there. Feedback becomes difficult, for example, like it could be easy to view that as personal attacks. So I think that the things that DEI tries to solve when we talk about unfairness, when we talk about exclusion, these are the exact things that would tear teams apart. So if company is explicit about equity, about how to communicate inclusively to the employees, we're promoting behaviors where everybody is lifting each other up, where teammates feel that their ideas are being heard, being valued. And I think that this is the kind of culture that can bring us to success, and that actually would yield more result, especially thinking on a team basis, how you can create functional teams that delivers the best.
Yeah, that's awesome. Interesting. I think some of the stuff reminds me of like Benji was talking about earlier about these operating manuals and creating safe spaces. And that brings me to this idea of sort of bringing your full self to work. And I think this is something that we hear a lot in the DEI space. And I think I've heard DEI practitioners argue both sides of it. Benji, I was wondering, what are your thoughts on this concept of like bringing your full self to work?
Yeah, I come from the side of it of, heck yes, I am bringing my full self to work, in particular because I'm already here. So like there's books behind me on my bookshelf, and I don't want to have to figure out for every different position of the camera, can you see the right books about me, or am I revealing secrets about myself? I think if I go over here a little bit too much, you can see Alcoholics Anonymous, and like, yeah, that's an important book to me. I've been sober 10 years, but I don't want to have to hide that. But also giving the full context, such as I have a sick kid at home, that puts actions into context. There's a cognitive bias called the fundamental attribution error, where we, when we think of something bad or something not so great that we ourselves did, we'll think, oh, that's because I was in a bad mood that day. But when we see someone other than us make that same error, we'll think that's because they are fundamentally a lazy person. They are fundamentally a sleepy person. So when we can put our actions into the context of, I had a sick kid, my hands hurt a lot today, then we can think of our coworkers more in the full context of, it is not Benji's attribute that he is a bad speller. It is a condition of the particular day. Yeah, let's put my actions in context. The other side of that is how much work does it take to hide who I actually am? How much work does it take to hide, such as rearranging my bookshelves? Am I going to skip 2 minutes of prep for a meeting because I'm busy rearranging my bookshelves. I don't want to do that. I want to show up as I fully am. I don't know if there are other perspectives on that of how it's beneficial to not have to bring your full self to work.
Yeah.
I
Erica.
would just like to add, I think we have to be cautious that when we say that to people, that we are actually in environments that are ready to accept people as their full selves. I think I've been a part of a lot of organizations and companies that say that, and it kind of goes back to some earlier comments like, does this company really believe what they say? But are people actually, are you saying that to people and setting them up for failure? Right? Are you asking them to bring their full selves, and now you've set a trap for them because your culture and your company wasn't ready to accept them as they are. So I think that there's two sides of that. There's a company saying to the employee, or an organization saying to a member that we are ready for you to be whoever you are and bring everything, all the good and the bad and everything that contributes to you doing your job here. But then there's a trust part of this situation for the individual to trust the company enough to do that. And that's a handshake. And so it's not just enough to say it, it really has to be a company or an organization repeatedly showing that they can do this, so that you build up that trust with the person so that they do feel comfortable bringing them their full selves to work.
I think this is a place where those of us in positions of relative privilege can demonstrate that it is safe to do that. So for instance, I begin my introductions to the new engineers by describing myself as a transgender man who spent the first 10 years of my career as a woman software engineer. And so I'm in a position of relative power, and I can put myself out there with that particular background, and that makes it safe for other people to do that. So we can model, yes, this is safe.
Yeah, I worry about sometimes, I guess where I come from it is sometimes like the weaponization of that idea. And then we get into like the paradox of tolerance, and folks who, who might not necessarily be down with the ideas and behind diversity, equity, inclusion, fighting for their space in our organizations, and how do we handle that? I mean, I think that's an interesting broader question. Like, how do we handle folks who just don't seem to demonstrate a curiosity about diversity, equity, inclusion, or can be sometimes hostile to it? Yeah, there's some. I mean, I think you've talked a little bit about like working into the career ladder. I was wondering if you had some examples or thoughts there.
I think in this case, the company needs to take a stance, right? So there is the intolerance of these kind of situations when people are simply going against that, because that would mean that we're not making a safe space for everyone anymore. So in this case, I think the answer is pretty clear. We have it in the engineering levels. We have a baseline on how we would expect your behavior to be. So if that bar is not met, then that would go against the culture that we work really hard to establish.
Great. Any other thoughts coming, Erica?
Yeah. So I think it goes back to your statement that you brought up earlier, Mecca, where he was talking about how culture is just a series of things that you reward or punish. And I think we have to be really conscious of what we're rewarding in those kinds of situations. To Yenny's point, a company has to make a decision, and they have to consistently reward based on what they would like to see as far as inclusion in the company. But I think another part of it is really making sure that you're practicing this. This is something that is ongoing. This is a growth process, and so you need to understand that everybody's not going to be at the same place in this growth process, and work to bring people along is also something that I've seen.
Awesome.
Yeah. If I were just to add a little bit,
Michael.
yes to everything Yenny and Erica said. Incentives matter. That's rewards and penalties. I do agree that it's very important that we help show everyone who's joining the company what matters in our culture, help them understand why it matters, let them also know what's expected. And like Yenny, we've kind of incorporated that into our career ladder explicitly so that it can be called out, required, and part of how we promote, hire, fire. And when ultimately it is a decision, when you have people in your organization who are not interested in getting better or not interested in supporting, then we show them the door.
That's also
think
something we can
go ahead.
tackle. Yeah, that's also something that we can think about during the hiring process. For example, at Rasa, we have a cultural interview, and these are the exact questions that we want to ask to make sure that for the folks who are entering the company, they also believe in these values, so that it wouldn't come into a situation where the company is marketing that we care a lot about DEI, and then there are some people in the company who are actually not on board. So I think that would also be an effective strategy there.
Awesome. We are just about out of time. One thing that this does remind me of is Nicole Sanchez, who says, like, ideologies are one thing, but then when it comes to behaviors, right? Feel free to have your ideology, but if your behaviors don't match our expectations, that's where we get into spaces where we can take action. All right, great. Thank you all so much today. That is all the time we have. Again, the insights from our panelists were fantastic. So thank you. For all the folks in the audience who want to keep the conversation going, the panelists and myself will be taking questions now on the Lead Dev Slack in the Diversity and Inclusion channel. So we'll see you all there. For everyone else, thank you for joining. We hope to see you next time.